Shobha Day, one of India's most popular writers and cultural chroniclers, says, and I quote her, her heart, mind, and stomach are in a committed relationship with all things edible, unquote, often to the exclusion of people. In the run up to her turning 75 on January 7th, 2023, she knew a book was expected of her to mark a landmark birthday, so she decided to use food as a vantage point to her life. The result is Insatiable, a chatty, free flowing chronicle of food and people around it. From expressing great angst about her name being changed from Anuradha to Shobha under pressure from a stern uncle, to wondering what if she had written the memoir while drinking Dog Point, her all time favorite Sauvignon Blanc, rather than Chas, India's widely loved whipped up yogurt drink. She jumps themes at will in the book. As someone who pioneered a linguistic cocktail in the 1980s, what is now known as Hinglish, Day continues to relish throwing in Indian words into the mix. With a career spanning 50 plus years and publishing her 25th book, Shobha Day remains an influential urbane voice. She spoke to Mayank Chhaya Reports from Mumbai. Uh,
Yeah.
Food as a vantage point for your memoir. What triggered that? Is it the fact that it is so viscerally personal?
What triggered the personal aspect of the memoir?
No, I'm saying
Well,
food as the vantage point to your memoir, the latest one.
I still don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
No, no, you're looking at your personal life in this particular
Yes.
book, Insatiable, with food
Yeah.
as the center of it.
With food. Oh, I didn't get that word. I didn't catch food. Okay. Well, food I've used as a metaphor for life itself because there are hungers and there are hungers, but the hunger for food is the most basic kind of hunger. And when I said insatiable, my hunger for life, it isn't restricted just to food, but food, I believe, is a great bonding. It's like super glue. When you share a meal with someone, you get several insights into how that person eats, what that person's cultural background may be, um, habits. I find food extremely fascinating. It's like almost a psychological study of a person when you watch them eat. And food is something that is very primal. It gives all of us enormous pleasure. It satiates elementary hunger, but it goes well beyond that. The pleasure of eating, the pleasure of sharing is on another level altogether.
Indeed, indeed. Do you think life eventually boils down to what is often unfairly described as baser needs, food and sex?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, much as we'd like to romanticize life and discuss the poetry of existence, eventually you need food to survive, and that goes for sex too. I mean, we wouldn't be here, the human race, without either of those two. So I don't understand why there has to be uh, so much self-consciousness about acknowledging it.
Uh, reading parts of your book, it struck me that you say food for you trumps people, even people rather. Is your draw to food primordial, something that existed originally?
I really do enjoy food enormously, maybe much more than a lot of other people do, or much more than they acknowledge the importance of it in their lives. I look forward to every meal. It could be something extremely insignificant. It could be just my everyday morning cup of tea and toast, but I actively look forward to enjoying that toast. I want it to be sourdough. I want it to be toasted right. I want the butter to melt just so that a little bit of it may dribble from the corner of my mouth. So I am very particular about food, but like I've said in several interviews, I'm not. a food snob. I'm not a gourmet. I'm not a food critic. I just happen to enjoy food, uh, maybe in a very exaggerated way, because I understand how much and appreciate how much pleasure it gives me.
Right. Since you described yourself as not being a gourmet person when it comes to food, do you think it's possible to drink chas with as much sophistication as Dog Point?
Well, Dog Point is one of the best Sauvignon Blancs I have enjoyed. I like the Marlborough region. I came across Dog Point very accidentally. But this afternoon, I had chash at lunch because it's very hot. And the chash is again like Dog Point. You can have very good Sauvignon Blancs and you can have mediocre Sauvignon Blancs and you can have Sauvignon Blancs which don't deserve to be called Sauvignon Blancs. Chash is the same. You can have a very well made chash or you can have just your pedestrian everyday chash, which, which without any investment in that chash. At my home, Pushpa, who's quite the star of the book, knows how particular I am about even chash, makes sure that there is kala salt. How do you call it?
It's
Um,
yeah, black salt. It is black salt.
Black salt. It does have black salt. It is frothy, my chas. It does have a sprig of mint in it. It does have just the right balance of salt and a bit of sugar. So yes, I don't think the comparison is entirely out of place.
How do your friends and even your husband take to the fact that you are, in your words, heart, mind, and stomach in a committed relationship with all things edible?
That I have this bond with all things wonderful. Is that
Edible,
the question?
edible.
Edible,
Yeah.
edible. Well,
I was
I,
quoting you.
well, I think they should be delighted because we're all extremely conscious of what we put into our mouths and not always what comes out of our mouths, unfortunately. But the edible experience is not something the family takes casually. We are very particular about, like I said, I'm particular about toast. My husband can be very particular about the way his cheese is sliced. And this evening it wasn't sliced correctly, so we had a bit of situation. But all the children, all of us, whether it's bhel puri, sev puri, pani puri, just plain old rotla, tepla, whatever it may be, we are finicky about our food, but we don't take it to extremes and make other people aware or conscious of these little hang-ups of ours. It's just that food matters. Food matters a lot in our family. So I would think that it's a shared kind of a quirk or a
Okay.
freaky kind of involvement and engagement with food.
Describe your ideal food platter if you were to combine all that you like into a single thali.
Oh goodness, it will be so highly eccentric because I do have a passion for foie gras, though I don't eat it very often. I also like varan bhat, which is the Maharashtrian staple in all families, a lot, but the varan has to be made velvety and smooth and just perfectly tempered. So, but foie gras and varan bhat sound dreadful even to me, however adventurous I claim I am. So the thali, I think the most complete thali in India, according to my taste, would be the Gujarati thali.
Indeed.
It has all the various food components in their right order, in the right place, with the right textures, with the right the sweetness combining with tart. There is tikha, there is meetha, there is khatta. Um, there is at least three different kinds of farsans, which for a Maharashtrian family would be unthinkable. It's just too expensive to have three farsans in a Maharashtrian family. But the South Indian thali is less exciting because it goes from just versions of rasam. That's me talking. I'm sorry, there are South Indians who'll object to that violently because every family has their own rasam and their own sapad recipes. But for me, it after 2 days, I can't handle much more of it. Whereas a guju thali, I can eat on a daily basis, really, and not get bored because the variation, even with their pulses, their dals, the way whether they serve it with what we call the biscuit biscuit
Bhakri.
bhakri, or the tepla, which can also have methi or not have methi. The dal, which a lot of people find extra sweet, but I love the guju dal, and it's got to have the fresh peanuts in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Gujarati thali sort of would complete my sensual experience. But if I were to pick foods from the world, I can tell you what wouldn't be on that thali for sure, and that would be pizzas and burgers and dogs. I just find the world and pasta. I just find the world. I've just come back from South America. It was very distressing in a way to see that two countries, Argentina and Brazil, with their own very rich traditions in food, have all succumbed to the global and very lazy way of eating something when you're in a rush or when you're hungry, and that's just basic pizzas with lots of cheese on top. I mean, you can't go very wrong. So when in doubt, just go down the cheese. It seems to me a very lazy way to enjoy food.
As a Gujarati, I applaud your endorsement of the Gujarati thali. And again, as a Gujarati, I wanted to start our conversation with this line, Anuradhaben apnu swagat chhe. So I might as well do it. I didn't start with that, but I'm going to
Thank you.
come to
Mane
the
bau
other.
gamech.
Arre, saras, saras. Someday, in fact, I'm going to talk a bit about that in a little bit. Uh, just a couple of questions more about food. Does age have a bearing on one's food choices?
Oh, for sure, it does because today I can't overindulge without it making me uncomfortable at the end of the meal. I cannot eat too many combinations of food or eat something that's overspiced. I have never eaten anything that has too much oil in it in any case. But yes, I notice how both my husband and I, our food habits have changed as we've grown older. I noticed it in my father in his 90s that his a simple Maharashtrian meal every evening, well, first of all, the portions shrink dramatically,
Correct.
and so does your choice of what you like to eat, particularly at dinner, and it becomes lighter and lighter. And he would eat a lot of kachumbar and a lot of dahi, which both my husband and I have also taken to eating more than we used to in the past for our sort of daily, everyday dinner. And it's certainly not a part of the Bengali cuisine. They don't know salads and kachumbar. They don't consider anything vegetarian as food. It doesn't qualify. It's like a little snack that you have between meals. But I definitely feel I can sense a change in my own palate. There are lots of
I
things
see.
which are a no-no now.
You've been known to say that if someone were to give you khichdi made in a particular way, you are fundamentally happy.
Yes, because khichdi is the ultimate comfort food, I think, for a lot of Indians, and that goes across communities and across class because we all have our own way of making khichdi. But the combination of dal and chawal, and with or without a tadka, is something that's well across India, certainly pan India, and it's easy to make. It's easy to digest. It can be made very delicious, or it can be just very basic, whichever way. Also, khichdi is an underrated food in our cuisine. We look at it as something pretty down in the food chain, in food snobbery, but it shouldn't be because you can elevate a khichdi and make it something truly wonderful just by the consistency. I hate lumpy khichdi, for example. And if it's too gilla gilla, again, it's too soupy. It's not a good khichdi. Consistency is very key, and so is the balance in the tarka. I mean, I like my tarka in ghee poured over the khichdi. A lot of people like to cook the khichdi with a dollop of ghee in it. Both work, both work fine, but eventually it's really the aftertaste of a khichdi eaten with just a simple achar or I like it with green chili pickle and roasted papad, preferably with the black pepper papad, the Rajasthani papad,
Wonderful. Yeah.
and and cold dahi on the side. It's perfect. When I come back from my travels, that's really what I ask for. The first thing I want to devour is homemade khichdi.
That's wonderful. Growing up, I remember khichdi used to be served, and people used to make a little well in it and pour ghee, and that's how it was eaten.
Absolutely. But now ghee is staging quite a comeback, which I'm happy about because it really is not as evil as it was made out to be.
Right.
Ghee is pretty good for your system, and as you grow older, you start valuing ghee much more than you did when in your 30s. My children, I don't think, would bother to touch ghee because perhaps their trainers tell them that they'll gain 3 ounces if they have a spoonful of ghee in their food. I don't know, but it's certainly good in terms of even our shastras tell us that um, ghee, 1 spoon, not an overload of ghee, but certainly a spoonful of ghee is good even for people who are prone to arthritis and so on. So I'm a great believer in the old desi theories about food compatibility.
Right. Just the last question about the food theme. What's your pet peeve in the way people eat their food? Mine, for instance, are several. One is the way they chew or smack or slurp, or even to have remnants of rice and other bits on their fingers. I hate finger licking. What is yours? I have a big list. I don't know what yours is.
I don't necessarily disapprove of slurping or even finger licking, uh, provided it's not done in a very gross way.
There is
Because
no other way.
honestly, no, no, no. I can show you a pretty sensuous way of doing it. It's quite nice. I can demonstrate it.
If you
This,
do it, there will be a very insane meme. So please go ahead.
I mean, if you're eating, you can do it elegantly, and you can do at the end of it, and it may be a little suggestive, but it's not gross.
Agreed.
So finger
Agreed.
licking. Yeah. So also the pleasure that we derive from eating with our fingers. People often make the mistake of, especially when they're writing about food, to say that so and so ate with his or her hands. Well, obviously you don't eat with your feet. So the
Indeed.
correct way to say it is she used or he used his fingers and not a spoon or a fork or a knife to eat. Indian food is best eaten with your fingers. And part of the delight is savoring the taste, the aftertaste that's left on your fingers. So why cheat yourself out of a sensual experience? Why not just go for it?
What if you were having dinner with Gandhi, who, apart from everything else, was notoriously and famously austere and frugal in his consumption? I'm trying to imagine you having or dining with Gandhi.
Well, I did have the pleasure of dining with Morarji Desai, who was a son.
Okay.
And that meal, and he was known also to be austere and frugal and very fastidious about his food habits. I won't go into his beverage habits, just restricted to food. And it was anything but frugal. It was a meal for an extraordinarily wealthy person. There were katoris and katoris and katoris of things like badam shira made in ghee. There were katoris of almonds soaked overnight. There were katoris of walnuts and cashew nuts, and dahi, of course, huge katoris of dahi, and even the way he ate it, fruits, at least five different kinds of cut fruits were presented to him. So he may have called himself a Gandhian, austere, frugal in his ways, or almost saintly in his approach to anything that was worldly. But the meal we had was anything less than lavish. It was a very expensive meal.
Yeah, I've seen that. To digress, to change gears a bit now, Anuradha versus Shobha. Let's say I knew nothing about you, including your name, and was meeting you for the first time. I would not have taken you for a Shobha. Anuradha, for sure. Tell me what the angst is.
The Anuradha syndrome, now that I've made it into one, is going to be something that causes a great deal of comment and questioning. And I'm continued to question myself whether I would have been a very different person had I stayed with the name I was given at birth as per my nakshatra, which in the hierarchy of nakshatra is, I think it's seventh or 17th. I'm numbers challenged. And the nakshatra description suggests a certain fragility and also an abundance to share and give. Now, the abundance to share and give, I think I do possess even as a very pedestrian Shobha. But the fragility, which maybe I've done a very good job of concealing it for 75 years, maybe I would have been more upfront about acknowledging it as an Anuradha. But it is a classical name. It is a poetic name. It was the name that was given to me with good reason, having been born under the nakshatra of Anuradha. So I do feel a sense of loss and regret. I wish my parents had stuck to my nakshatra name, and but the fact that they didn't, and that Shobha Day sounds good, it sounds contemporary, it sounds modern, it sounds cool, and it is a brand name that has benefited me a lot on many fronts. I don't not enjoy being Shobha Day, but Shobha by itself, no, I've never ever enjoyed that name. Never. So today, these days, it's really a pleasure when people who have read the book address me even playfully as Anuradha. It delights me.
Tatya, your uncle, or as you
Yes,
call him, your father's despotic brother.
yes.
You also say that half in jest, perhaps half seriously, that Tatya killed Anuradha. That sounds that sounds interestingly over
Severe.
the top and quite hilarious to me.
Well, severe in a way, but Tatya was quite harsh. And a lot of Maharashtrian men, and women, it is a community trait that they're not, uh, they don't have the sentimentality that I see or in, say, the Gujaratis or the Bengalis, who are much more expressive emotionally, much more demonstrative in how they show their feelings, especially within family. But Tatya was a very distant figure. He was much, much older than my father, who was pretty scared of him. And my father was quite an autocrat himself in adulthood. So you can imagine Tatya's personality. I meant it in a way that was almost like a metaphor that maybe the girl I would have been had he allowed my parents to stick to that name. Uh, the chance was denied to me by that one arbitrary autocratic decision made by the family elder. So it does sound a bit extreme, but there it is.
Uh, you've been known to say rather that you have not been particularly ambitious or driven. Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, when I look at your life, the image that comes to my mind is a series of automated glass door opening as you walk, offering you all kinds of opportunities. And this is not to minimize the fact that you have worked for it, but at the same time, it seems like a pretty unobstructed sailing over the last 50 years or so. Is that a right impression?
It's not a fairy tale at all, and it is the right description. I really don't have hard luck tales to trot out. And it's more a question of a certain reticence. That's my personality, no matter what the public perception may be. I'm not someone who's pushy enough to go for the main chance. I've never done it. I've never had to, maybe that's a better way to put it. And I've been very lucky that there have been people who have sensed something, some talent within me, some ability within me, which maybe I have not seen in myself. I've been too close to all of it to have any perspective. I never did think in terms of, oh, this is my potential or this is my ambition, and I've got to work hard to get there. I've pretty much gone along with decisions made for me, career decisions, professional decisions by people I considered smart. If I had not respected their minds, maybe I would have challenged those decisions or given it a shot and then walked away from them. But the fact that all those decisions, in retrospect, were the right decisions as far as I'm concerned, is really, it may sound, like I said earlier, like a fairy tale, but the doors did open. But once the doors were opened for me, there was no question that I shortchanged either myself or my employers, my publishers, my editors. I gave each and every opportunity my 110% and worked very hard to prove myself in all those various fields that opened up. So I would say it's having been at the right place at the right time definitely helped. But more than any of
Yeah.
it, having encountered people with large enough hearts to give an untried person a shot at something big and wonderful, I think a lot of the credit should go to them.
Speaking of which, speaking of changes, you started Stardust at 23, right?
Yes.
What was the trigger for something like that at that age?
Well, I have always gone with the why not kind of attitude in life. Stardust was not my baby per se, it's just turned 50. And Narihira continues to be the proud owner and proprietor of Stardust. And it was his baby. And he just happened to uh, see something in me while I was working with him as a copywriter in his advertising firm that made him believe that I would be good at editing a magazine like that, because a magazine like that at that time did not exist in India. It was a game changer. And perhaps he liked the way I wrote copy. Perhaps I impressed him with a certain attitude I had towards the language itself, the way I used English, the way I used it even while I was writing copy. That made him take this huge risk. But behind it all, he was like the solid pillar and the solid foundation. He could always have sacked me and hired another editor. So that was not such a big gamble after all for him. But because he was very clear in his vision of what he wanted Stardust to do, to be, how we wished to market it, what its positioning should be. And we were very, very much in sync with what he planned for the magazine and what I truly enjoyed doing, which was creating the basic, the structure, the formats, the different columns, the doing some of the big shoots, visualizing those, getting catchy headlines going, and breaking a lot of the rules of film journalism at the time, which was monotonous and rather dull with a kind of PR syrupy style of projecting our movie stars and making them like gods and goddesses. Whereas Stardust came along and brought them all right down to earth. Some of them came crashing down and not very prettily. And the others who made their peace with Stardust profited greatly by being cover stars and getting featured every few months in the magazine, which went on to create publishing history and publishing records in terms of its circulation and its popularity.
I've said it for almost 40 years now that you pioneered English. I wanted to tell you that it's been now recognized that you are the progenitor of what's known as English at this stage. Tell me a bit about it, and while you're at it, clear up this for me. Did you coin the term Bollywood?
I wish I had. I wish I could claim that as my original contribution to what Bollywood itself detests that term Bollywood. But it was not me. I believe it could have been Amit Khanna who did
I
coin
see.
that word because he was very active at the time and very much a media person. He could
Right.
have said it in an interview or in one of the academic articles he wrote, but it was certainly not me. I would hate to take credit for something which is so huge and in the popular imagination, it sums up the in Hindi film industry and in a way that annoys the stalwarts like Mr. Amitabh Bachchan has always vehemently protested and said he hates the term Bollywood as do a lot of other people. But it was I believe it could have been Amit Khanna who invented that.
Okay.
But English with an H, yes, I'm very proud in now looking back over 50 years to say it was something so organic that happened so naturally. It was street speak, the way Bombaya Hindi is spoken. It's not really Hindi. It's an amalgamation of so many different languages. It's got a bit of Gujarati and Marathi and, for example, Bihari, a bit of Urdu, but predominantly it's the language spoken on the streets of Mumbai, which in itself is a cauldron of communities from across India. It is the ultimate melting pot in India. So you hear language spoken, Hindi particularly, spoken very differently. English too, for that matter. There is Bambaya English now, which is a language of its own. And a word like jhakas or bindas, for example, I cannot find an English equivalent which captures the essence of either of those two words. And this is just one of two words that I've picked at random.
Right.
Lots of phrases which came into existence as we went along with Stardust, and uh, they became almost mainstream. And soon, mainstream media had adopted it, and Times of India, after 10 years of resistance, was using it in their headlines. In a political paper, the headlines would have English words, which
Right.
shocked the Puritans. But that was the fun of it. And I do believe language is something very fluid, it's changing constantly. You cannot write language in stone and keep it there. It is something that evolves. And as it evolves, a lot of cultures and a lot of communities only enhance it and add richness to it with their contribution from their own mother tongue. So, language continues to fascinate me. I have a very keen ear for conversations, and even at an airport, I'm always listening for new words to pick up when I hear a co passenger use it within earshot. It registers, and I make a note of it mentally. And at the first opportunity I get, I quickly put it into a column or wherever I can.
Your second book, Starry Night,
Yes.
broke what you call the F barrier, using fuck for the first time without any equivocation or alibi or mitigation. Were you conscious of the use, or it was just part of linguistic flow?
No, it wasn't a deliberate decision. I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to use the F word and let's see what happens to India. Not at all. It was just the most natural way to use the word because it had a certain context. It wasn't just thrust into the narrative because it was something very bold to do at the time. It seemed the only appropriate word within that setting and that context. That's it. There were a lot of other Hindi cuss words as well in Starry Nights,
Right.
which were polite company still refuses to use, but they had, again, like I said, a certain relevance to the characters and to what they were saying to one another. And that's how people speak. It's not a forbidden word, uh, really. I mean, today it's used so casually, it's become uh, that word is used to express a whole gamut of emotions, and one can construct a whole uh, a whole story around the imaginative and very complicated and extremely creative use of the F word. But food also is a four-letter F word, so in a way, I equate both.
You know, I was going through a list of your books. Of 25, I think at least 20 starts with S.
Yes,
What's with that? Is it by design or default?
definitely by design. And I was kind of stuck in that S group till I decided consciously to break it with this book. And I'd done one other book with Kushwant Singh. It was called an anthology. It was yeah, it was called Uncertain Liaisons. It was about India's contemporary India's attitude, changing attitudes to sex and sexuality. But the book didn't do as well as the publishers anticipated, and Kushwant and I were quite disappointed. And the fixation for the word S actually was something that was put into my head by Nari Hira.
I
Maybe
see.
he had a fixation for that letter S because Stardust, and then I started Society for him as well, and Savvy, which he started later on his own. And at one point, he did mention it to me very casually, and I was this young, uh, extremely awestruck employee. And when he says to me that S seems to work for you, uh, somewhere at the back of my head, that comment of his did stick. And I decided, why take a chance? If S works, and I like the way S looks, it's very sensual. So is the word sensual, sensual.
Okay.
Uh, I decided to just go with S.
Just last three or four things. Has anyone ever told you that you often come across as a protagonist straight out of Sex and the City, even though your approach to life predates the series by several decades?
Perhaps that's an American perspective. I don't know. I don't necessarily identify with any of those ladies, quite honestly.
Mhm.
So no, it's
Okay,
it's certainly not something that is either conscious or uh, even attractive to think about.
right. Do you
I
think?
find them quite
Yeah,
pathetic.
yeah. I mean, they are vacuous, to tell you the truth.
No, they're not vacuous. It's just that I have a problem with women whose sole aim in life seems to be to dress in designer clothes in order to uh, entice a man. If the sole purpose of your life seems to be to get a man, that seems to show low ambition.
Right.
And I've never identified with that.
Do you think one of your strengths as a writer has been to co-opt readers into your life and lifestyle, which would seem aspirational or even rebellious to many young women?
Not as a conscious decision. The point about writing for any writer is to reflect the truth about your own life and about the life that you're familiar with, that you feel confident writing about. And this is my reality. This has been my reality pretty much since the age of 14 or 15, 16, 17, 18, certainly when I was in the world of modeling, which in those days, more than 50 years ago, was definitely uh, something very distant for most young Indian women coming from my kind of Maharashtrian middle class bureaucratic background. And it did expose me to a world that even today, 99% of young women in India would have zero access to. It did make me extremely aware of the privilege of being in that world, of being able to travel and meet people from all kinds of different fields, and mainly to be able to earn my own money and understand the value of paying my own bills from that age onwards, and being free of parental control in terms of finances. It was an important learning, and I'm just so glad that it happened when it did. So it was that I cannot suddenly start writing about rural India because it's way beyond my skill set. I've not lived in rural India, and I don't believe that any writer should be made to explain uh, why they write about their own lives or their own observations or their own fantasies. Uh, I'm not that I'm in any way equating myself to F. Scott Fitzgerald, who remains my absolute ultimate literary hero, but he was writing about a very specific period and a very specific social strata of New York society.
Right.
And yet, his books are universal. They are appreciated across the world so many years, so many decades later. So that was his reality. That was his chosen subject. He stuck to it. And he did it as well as he did because he was so confident of the material. Similarly, I'm confident of my material. I write that the best that I can because that's a very felt experience. It's not something borrowed. It's not like donning borrowed clothes. This is my wardrobe of ideas, of living, of thinking, and I'm happy to share it with those it interests.
In 1986, when I met you for the first time, India had just begun witnessing the emergence of a more confident middle class. Middle class self assurance picked up sometime around 1991, 1992, with the opening up of the economy by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and his Finance Minister Manmohan Singh. The middle class then and nearly 40 years hence, what attitudinal changes do you see? Because you have had a perch on urban middle class aspirations, problems, etc.
Well, as a chronicler and a storyteller, I've seen the change, monitored the change, written about the change with enormous interest because I like the idea of being able to see change and also be a part of that change. The main differential, I would think, is opportunity, especially opportunities for women. When I was growing up, we didn't have that kind of mobility, job mobility. We didn't necessarily have access to higher education. If you were from the middle class, you were expected to graduate, most certainly finish school, most definitely. And by the time you were 20 or 21, most families would want to see their daughters married, and that put an end to any other kind of a dream unless she married into a family that supported her dream. That didn't happen all that frequently. Well, today it's a very different world, and I'm very happy to see that change, especially for women. They are much more their own people. They have much more agency over their decisions. They have much more agency over the way they want to project themselves, the choices they make. So that one word choice, which was restricted to in my generation, all that changed after 1991 when the world literally opened up. And of course, with satellite television, we got to see how people around the world were living. And it was easier to travel. It was easier to dream of places that were only picture postcards and actually arrive there, whether it's America or Switzerland, as shown in Yash Chopra's movies. It was all within our grasp, and that was a huge impetus to do better in life, to earn more, to educate ourselves more, to experiment more. And the change today is unimaginable for even someone like myself who's pretty kind of insulated against commenting on change and saying, "Oh my God, how can this how can this be happening?" Well, it is happening. It is going to happen, and the pace at which it's happening is pretty impressive. To some, it may be shocking, but to me, it's organic and very natural. And to see women actually achieving their ambitions, to see a lady commander in Air India flying the big bird across the North Pole with an all-woman crew. Yes, it makes my heart soar with pride that there are women who can do it today and they can pick careers like becoming pilots and commercial airline pilots. It is something that would have been unthinkable. The most we could dream about was joining Air India and becoming, part of the the
The, the crew.
the crew
Yeah.
uh, on board. Certainly not being in the cockpit and commanding a 777. So this is a big change. I think that lady, hats off to her. She represents that change and is symbolic of that great big change. I mean, you can't fly higher than that. I
Uh,
love it.
Before I let you go, where do you come down on the question of wokeism? In this country, it's become being woke has become so rampant. There is a significant pushback. I don't know what the scene in India is.
To start with, I hate that four-letter word. It's very pretentious. It's very loaded. This whole woke thing has led to a certain division in our societies, which is not very palatable. Even in urban society, the woke and the non woke, they're two distinct camps. And who decides whether woke is superior at the end of the day? You make your choices as per your circumstances and your own belief systems. So being brainwashed into doing things to appear woke is causing a great amount of stress and strain. And I don't even think that the whole woke thing is going to last very long. It's been played out. It hasn't been all that successful. And I'm quite happy to be unwoke. I'm quite happy to be myself. And to me, that is the most woke thing any human being can aspire to, just to be yourself and be happy in that space.
Indeed. How do you think the country's cultural landscape has changed since the rise of Narendra Modi?
It is, uh, it is still changing, it is still evolving, and it's a too big a question for me to answer in a capsule because I am still extremely sensitized to that change, commenting on it widely in my columns, and watching it closely because any kind of suppression of our right to expression is something for a creative person, for a writer, or for any citizen for that matter. Uh, it is something that is a concern, a major concern. So I also believe that as a nation, we are extremely opinionated. We are extremely naturally rebellious, which is great. We like to challenge authority. We are not. We don't have a herd mentality. So any person or any political party that believes it can impose these restrictions is slightly delusional because it may happen as a temporary phenomenon because of political circumstances, but it's not something that can endure or last. Indians and India is way too diverse and way too pluralistic in its attitude to life and living for that to ever happen.
And to conclude, I'm curious about how long before any conversation with you uh, touches on your sustained good looks and beauty regimen. I'm not interested in that, but I'm curious to know because I'm sure you encounter it all the time.
All the time. I could be addressing the most serious forum anywhere in the world. We could be talking about issues that concern us all, which are not skin deep. But eventually, when the hands go up at question hour, it's always but always the same question. So, how do you preserve yourself, madam, or how do you maintain yourself? And I stopped joking about it. I did at one point, but the joke started to backfire a little when people took it literally and attempted it. And I would say, I soaked myself in a tub of vinegar with a perfectly straight face. And that was leading to women having issues with splashing vinegar on their faces. And my children warned me against it. They said, your sense of humor is not always understood. So just stop saying it, mother. I think any human being, man or woman, you look as good as you feel. So going by that, I guess you can conclude I feel good.
On that note, irrespective, you look as fetching now as you did when I met you in '86. અને અનુરાધાબેન તમને મળીને બહુ જ આનંદ થયો.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
And
And
all the
thanks for
best.
calling me
I'll send you
Anuradha
the
Ben.
links. It was wonderful
I
to talk to you.
lovely, absolutely lovely. I enjoyed it so very much. Thanks, man.
All the best. Bye bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.